Good morning or afternoon, and welcome to day 2 of the 3rd annual Nat King Cole Generation Hope Music Educators Conference entitled Recapitulation, Music Education Yesterday, Today, and Tomorrow. Thank you for your patience. We're starting a few minutes late, but we had to get some technical things squared away before we had you come in and just waiting for no reason. So we had you waiting in the outside room, but thank you so much for your patience. This session conference sponsored by the Nat King Cole Generation Hope with the generosity of the Selz Foundation. My name is Edrick Rhodes, and I will be your facilitator today. Currently, I'm the Director of Curriculum and Administration in the Education Division at the John F. Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts. Over the next couple of days, we will explore music education prior to the pandemic, through the pandemic, and moving forward as we live through the pandemic in real time. Yesterday, we had 2 outstanding sessions on mental health for teachers and students, in addition to our keynote and welcome from the distinguished and acclaimed film, television, stage actor, and producer, Mr. Harry Lennox. The recordings of yesterday, today, and tomorrow's sessions will be available in the coming weeks on YouTube. So I encourage you to catch up on anything that sparked your attention for a deeper dive. Our first session today will be in a unique format, more like what we call a concurrent session. I will introduce you to the 3 presenters. From there, you will move into breakout rooms for the sessions based on your primary teaching load you shared with us when you registered. You can adjust the room, but I highly encourage you to stay in your room selected as assigned. As the concurrent, all rooms are being recorded, so therefore you don't have to worry about jumping. If you say, oh, I teach chorus and band, or I teach all 3, the recordings are there so you can go back to get any information you want at your leisure. So now, with that being said, let me now introduce you to our 3 incredible presenters. For our band teachers, we have the session entitled Rebuilding and Reflecting Post-COVID-19, Developing a Comprehensive Program as an Outcome of COVID, presented by Dr. Julia Heath Reynolds. Julia Heath Reynolds currently serves as Assistant Professor of Music Education at Belmont University. Previously, Dr. Heath Reynolds taught elementary and secondary general music and special education at Indiana State University. As a member of NAFME and ISME, Dr. Heath Reynolds is active in the field of music education, has presented research and workshops at the state, national, and international level. Dr. Heath Reynolds is currently serving as the chair of the NAFME Children with Exceptionalities, SRIG. She holds a BME, MME, and a PhD in music education from Florida State University. Her research focus includes music for special learners in primary and secondary schools, music educator training, and nonverbal communication in the music classroom. I also want to add phenomenal music educator, conductor through our previous years of being band directors. So we're so happy to have that expertise in the room. For our orchestra teachers, we have the session entitled The Perfect Storm, Navigating Music Program in the Midst of the Global Pandemic, presented by Dr. Rufus Jones Jr. Dr. Rufus Jones Jr. has conducted orchestras at all levels for the last 31 years throughout the country and abroad. He's currently the principal conductor for the Florida Youth Orchestra and serves on the International Conductors Guild Board of Directors. In addition to his success as an orchestral conductor and music educator, Dr. Jones is a published author. His research has focused on the significant contributions of African-American classical musicians. His latest book, Dean Dixon, Negro at Home, Maestro Aboard, chronicles the life of the first African-American orchestral conductor to have a successful international career. And for our choral educators, we have a session entitled A Choral Community Sonata, We Believe in You, presented by Mr. John Wayne Witherspoon. With a teaching career spanning over 30 years, John Witherspoon's impact on the music community cannot be overstated. For 30 years, he has served as a choral conductor at Lake Worth High School in Palm Beach, Florida. His greatest joy in teaching is to foster connections between his students and music. He's had conducting honors courses, acted as both an adjudicator and clinician, and currently serves as the artistic director of Espressivo, I'm sorry. He holds a bachelor's degree from Southeastern Louisiana University, a master's degree from Florida Atlantic University, and presently pursuing a Doctor of Music Arts degree at the University of Kentucky. Best of luck to you. He and his wife, Althea, who he claims is responsible for helping him to come out of his shell, have 4 incredible children who help fill their home with laughter. John has also served our country in the United States Marine Corps. Good morning to Dr. Heath, Reynolds, Dr. Jones, and Mr. Witherspoon. Thank you for being with us today. Now, you will be free to move to your breakout rooms. Please note the orchestra session will take place in this main room, and the other 2 sessions will move to the breakout rooms that are already open. So if you're not familiar with Zoom, please go down to the bottom of your Zoom window. You'll find the breakout room tab, and from there you'll see the 2 other options, band and chorus. This session will end at 1:15 Eastern Time. We will reorganize ourselves prior to 1:15. We may now go ahead and move about to our rooms. Thanks.
Okay, well, I think we should go ahead and get started. I think everyone who is moving has already moved, and thank you all for being here this afternoon. My name is, formally, I'm Dr. Rufus Jones, and as Mr. Rhodes has stated, I live in South Florida in the Broward County area, and I am currently one of the conductors for the Florida Youth Orchestra, and I serve on the board of directors of the International Conductors Guild. I've been conducting orchestras, as my bio stated, for a number of years, close to 31 years, but I've had the opportunity to work with wind ensemble, chorus, jazz band, all of the typical ensembles. And so the presentation, or the conversation as I call it, is going to really touch upon that experience in working with all of the various ensembles. And that essentially will kind of give us a sense of exactly what I would like to focus on today with you. So without further ado, and hopefully there are no technical difficulties, I'm going to pull up my PowerPoint. I believe that if there's anyone here who would like to chime in during this presentation, again, it's technically a presentation, but I want it to be more of a conversation. It might be a little awkward because I don't believe you will be able to unmute yourself. But if there is a way, I believe that you can go to the chat, and I will be looking at that to respond to any questions. Matter of fact, let's go ahead and test that out if you don't mind. For those who are in the session, if you are a music educator, I don't want to assume that everybody that's a part of this presentation today is a music educator. I would love to get you to say that in because again, I want you to feel comfortable and what this and what I have to say today, again, in a conversational way, to feel free to offer your points of view. Thank you so much. This is Alice, Amanda. Thank you so much again for letting me know. And again, I want you to feel free to offer comments that I will read to the group. Let's see here. So Alice, thank you so much. You teach elementary violin in other groups. Amanda, North Carolina Orchestra Director, and Carolyn, teach Orchestra 6 through 12. Again, thank you so much. Michelle, you teach Orchestra 5 through 8. Again, thank you so much for commenting. And please, I will be looking at that chat for any clarification that might be needed. And just would love to get your input in terms of how you dealt with the topic that we're about to endeavor on, okay? So let me go ahead and pull up the PowerPoint. And again, I will continue to check. Here we go. All right. Okay, so can I just get someone to say that they can actually see the PowerPoint? If anything is out of doesn't look right, could you let me know before I move forward? Okay, awesome. Thank you, Suzanne, for letting me know. All right, so again, the perfect storm, navigating a music program in the midst of a global pandemic. And again, of course, my name is Rufus Jones. Listen, this is going to be, as I stated to Edrick when I was asked to do this, to be a kind of a conversation. And so the first objective of this presentation conversation is that to have a meaningful and real conversation on the challenges for music ensembles during the beginning, middle, and end of this pandemic. And I will say that statement so it's not misleading in any way. I fully recognize, as I'm sure you all do, that we are not at the end of this pandemic, but certainly the beginning of this pandemic, and even in the middle of it, when we didn't really know how to navigate in many respects, even with respect to our state, our local, our state, and our nationwide organizations that we rely on for leadership and rely on for ways, best practices. This was uncharted territory for everyone. And so in many respects, while we received recommendations on how to comport ourselves and how to make our programs continue to survive in this uncharted territory, we really didn't have a map. We all had to use those recommendations that were given to us by our organizations to do the best we can. And I think we all did, given the issues that we all faced. So I think it's important to have this conversation. I don't recall really being a part of any conference in the last year where we just kind of sat down and just had a conversation. What did you deal with, and how did you deal with the obvious issues of continuing continuing a music ensemble? How do we make this work, particularly at the beginning of this pandemic? And so, again, I'm looking forward to hearing from you via chat your thoughts, because this is by no stretch of the imagination the definitive way out, or the definitive way to navigate. But it is, I think, an observation that I obviously dealt with personally, and the colleagues in my community dealt with. And so it's just an opportunity to share, and to a lesser extent to vent. Okay. So again, that objective one is just to be able to have this conversation about what we had to do and how we managed during this pandemic, but also what did we, and we meaning, of course, educators, students, parents, administrators, community, what did we learn about ourselves as musicians, as lovers of music during this very difficult time? And again, I want this to be a part of the conversation as well, which might be different from mine and everyone else who is a part of this. This presentation, in the guise of the music education presentation, is not the result of any type of scientific research, which is the first disclaimer. Again, as I said, probably going to say it a million times, but this is a conversation. Every director has a different story with a different outcome, and this is my story. And so I wanted to kind of put that out there, again, hoping to, as a result, to get some feedback from you about telling your story. So I thought I would start out here in many respects, kind of a timeline, because I think this really hit all of us. And I don't think we really kind of, or at least I would put it to me, I didn't really understand the time in which this happened, and how quickly we as educators generally, but specifically music educators, had to respond. It is amazing when I actually put that time and kind of put that timeline out, that we really had to respond in such a short period of time in some way in order for us to continue to do the best we could do. And so I think by sharing this timeline, it may give a perspective to you all in terms of, my goodness, we had to respond in a way that we should never have to respond. We should always be prepared to do whatever is necessary to make sure that our students are given the best possible instruction and best possible experience, even when we can't control what's going on in our society. So we, of course, we knew about this, and I'm not going to get into the weeds about COVID-19 and where it was first discovered and how things progressed, other than to say that, you know, for me, I started out in a new position at Gulliver Preparatory, which is a wonderful independent school in Miami. I started there as the music director of all of the ensembles. That is to say, I was directing the chorus program, the band program, the jazz band program, and the string program. So chorus, band, jazz band, and strings. And so that was my responsibility, and taking over from someone who had been there for, well, I would say about 26 years, in and of itself was a fairly daunting task because the culture is already in place, and you, when you're coming in as a new director, you have to do certain things to make sure you're being respectful of the new tradition that has been there for many, many years, and also slowly but surely bringing in what you feel is going to make your imprint on the program. And so we were moving beautifully on that year, having a wonderful holiday concert and preparing for our MPA. For those of you may call it MPA, Music Performance Assessments, starting in January. And March is when we were going to start our MPA. And things were going well, although we were hearing about this pandemic and that was moving across the country. We didn't really know much about in terms of how it would affect education generally, specifically how it would affect our music programs. But it would really hit me fast in March 18. It was that day that teachers and administration met and decided, given everything that was going on with the COVID, and really so much that we didn't know other than people were dying and getting very, very sick from this disease, this coronavirus, that administration at our school made the decision to dismiss the students for that week. That was a Wednesday, and it was a week before their spring break, and to dismiss them until further notice. Unbeknownst to us, we were preparing that next day to learn about Zoom, the platform that we are using right now. It was my first time actually ever using the platform, and we had to move fairly quick in trying to learn the ins and outs of Zoom for those remaining days, because it was the spring break, which I mark as the 23rd to the 30th, where essentially we had been told by the administration that we would return, but we would return totally remote or resume virtually. And that took place on March 31st. And so all the teachers were asked to be creative as we ventured into this uncharted territory. And that was an easy kind of said than done as it relates to music educators. And I would have loved to just hear some of your responses in terms of when administrators told you and informed you as a result, the district, if you're public school, or the administrators, if you're private, inform you that you would be remote, but that you needed to be creative. And the first thing, yeah, in Palm Beach County, absolutely. So the first thing that happened, thank you, Alice, the first thing that happened for me is thinking, well, okay, it's creative is wonderful, creative is great, but how do we teach music ensemble virtually? And that was the question that I was trying to figure out. And the one thing that really was troubling to me was the answer that came back after every kind of avenue I would go into to try to figure out something. And the conclusion was simply during that week that you just can't. And I know that this was not the answer that my administration or administrators wanted to hear, but it allowed me, or it gave me an opportunity to really explain what we do. A lot of times administrators who are very supportive of what you do as a music educator really don't have a sense of the nuance and what it means to be in an ensemble, and to actually replicate that in a virtual world is just not possible. Not that it wasn't easy for those in the core curriculum. It wasn't easy, but they were able to make that transition so much more seamless than the music ensembles. And so I hear some of you, and let me just stop and just read some of the comments, because I really want to make sure everyone is seeing this and that I'm hearing you as well. Thank you so much again for those comments. I'm hearing from Alice about the same thing happened in Palm Beach County. We ended up with Google Meet as our platform. That's right, Zoom wasn't the only platform. Google Meet was another. 1 week, this is from Carolyn, 1 week to learn Zoom and hop into virtual learning. That must have been difficult. I had 2 weeks because our spring break started on the 19th, so we extended it an extra week. Yep. Can't you just unmute and play together? We got that too, Amanda. And again, it goes into what's going to come next in this presentation. The delays made it possible, and that is essentially the answer to the question that I had to express, because surely if you can have these meetings in Zoom and in Google, why can't ensembles come together and play and sing together? And we all know, as a result who even tried that it was more of a latency issue and other kinds of issues. But it gave me the opportunity, I don't know if you all experienced this as well. It gave me the opportunity, and this is really basic information that you all know. It might even be insulting if you're looking at it and trying to get an understanding, but believe me, being really as basic as you can and talking to administrators is not insulting at all. They appreciate it, because what they do is they see that you're trying to communicate to them about what it is and the difficulties it is to kind of do this. And so I just pretty much explained to the administrators in the same way that you see on the screen right now. What is a music ensemble? And I just went down the line. I was very detailed. I won't go into it with you because, again, I assume that most of you are in here. You are music educators. If you're not, please chat, and I'll be more than happy to clarify anything that's stated here. A group of musicians in one room. Yeah, that has a huge, I mean, you could take that statement alone and spend hours and talk about what that means. Musician ensembles, of course, are made up of strings, brass, woodwinds, percussion, rhythm section, voices. There's usually a leader of the ensemble, a conductor, a director. We make music as one instrument, and I had to spend a little bit of time explaining this concept of one instrument. I used it as a way of talking about this oneness of communication, that this is not an individual effort playing or singing in a vacuum, but everything that a player does, a singer does in that room has consequences in terms of what they will do. And so reading music as one instrument, one vocal instrument, or actually one instrument, is so very important. We listen to one another and we make musical adjustments in tone, intonation. And I went through this with in terms of explaining each of those terms, because I thought it was important to be very detailed, because the more detail I could give my administrators as to what goes into creating a music ensemble, what goes into creating music within an ensemble, was very helpful to them, and understood in terms of what we would need to actually do this, and how impossible it would be to actually have the same effect in a remote setting or a virtual setting. And so as you see here, I talk about the adjustments to achieve these listening. The adjustments are actually achieved through listening, not only next to one another, but across the ensemble. I have to explain this concept of across the ensemble. When you're playing in a large ensemble, you all know this, but when you're playing in a large ensemble, what is it that you're listening for? You're not just listening for your part, you're listening for others. You're listening for the importance of your part, the importance of other parts. And that can become something that the director actually teaches or expects from their students, so that it's not always something a teacher has to do to stop. Listen for the trombones, listen for the basses, violins. Those are things that I want, and I think we all want our students, no matter how inexperienced they are, to become very well versed in at a very young age. We want this to be a part of it. And so it was important to go through this process of explaining to the administrators. And again, the response was a very positive one, because many of them did not have a clue as to what the significance of moving from in-person to remote and the effectiveness of the teaching that would be expected in going into remote. And so that's really, really important. Give me a second. I want to read some of the comments. And again, thank you all so much. I want to make sure that everyone, that I'm acknowledging your comments. Let's see here. This is regarding, let's see. Right, I'm talking about Zoom, relied on Google Classroom to provide videos, either made by me or using YouTube resources through platform to help reinforce concepts. Smart music, how many of you all use smart music? Anybody try smart music during that period? I had to learn, a lot of my students actually knew about smart music. Again, I had to go about it and learning, and it was helpful in many ways. Let's see here, the group, because as soon as they played, it coded sound to them, so the teacher can't both play and hear. Okay, we're talking about the latency. Metronome, that was an issue here. Too expensive, that's right. You're right, Alice, very good point. We had it in our system. It was already purchased when I arrived there, so I never bothered to think about the cost of it. So thank you for bringing that perspective. You're right, Carolyn, the orchestra selection was very limited, and I found that to be the case as well. But again, we had that, we used it. I used it for various assignments in music theory, which I'll talk about a little bit. Thank you, Michelle. Sight Reading Factory was a good one. I used that a lot, Amanda, for my chorus, which was very helpful as well. So thank you again. Thank you again for that. So again, explaining to my administrators in terms of what an ensemble is was so very important. So the conclusion, of course, as you all very well know, and just kind of going through this process, is that the virtual platform that existed for us, which was Zoom, during this time would not work for music ensembles to continue doing what we do. And of course, I've already explained that, and you all know that. And so what I was able to do, and it was important, I'll skip down to this last point here on this particular slide. It was really important for me to be transparent and realistic to the students, parents, and administrators, because it was amazing to me how so many thought that somehow, some way we would be able to continue, even in this remote virtual environment, to find a way to do what we were doing in person. And again, it wasn't just me coming to that conclusion. It was our district organizations, our state, our national organizations, who I referred to many of my parents and administrators to, who were just not accepting of the fact that we just could not do what we had been doing in person, starting this remote platform, this virtual platform. But what we were able to do are various things that related to music appreciation, music history, music theory, and individual assessments. This was the one thing I added as we began to incorporate those three things: appreciation, history, and theory, because I did not want this process. I wanted everyone, as best as possible, to kind of become acclimated. It's not necessarily that it happened, but to become more acclimated to the idea that we would be remote for the remainder of the academic year. So we're talking about the last week for us in March, April, and the month of May. And so it was very difficult. And Carolyn, I hear you in terms of that. Let me take a moment, because that was something I was going to talk about as well, the attrition aspect of it. Carolyn says, I had quite a few people drop because they didn't see the point orchestra online. Some came back. And, you know, that is something that many of us had to deal with. What is this from Alice? I think the thing was different students were stumped by the technology, so they were excluded. Others so missed the social aspect of the group classes, they didn't want to join remotely. Alice, a very, very good point, and this is not something that is, isolated to you or to a small group. I think everyone, in conferring with my colleagues around the country, this was a form of a survival. And it hit so many of us hard, because I think this was a time, and I think you all would perhaps agree with this, this was a moment in time where any of us who looked at music and we kind of took it for granted, perhaps because it was something that we did every day, that we took for granted the socialization aspect, that we took for granted the community of coming together, that students took for granted at the time that the music room, the band hall, the orchestra hall, the chorus hall was a safe space for them. And to not have that space was a jolt and a shock for many of them. And so again, a number of my students as well, they didn't show up remote. They didn't see the point of trying to continue. They didn't sign up to take music appreciation, even though these things, if we're doing the best job we possibly can, we're of course incorporating appreciation, history, and theory and assessments into our ensemble, but kids did not sign up to do that exclusively. They signed up to be in a community. They signed up to be in a family. And to not have that opportunity, or to have that opportunity essentially taken from them, no matter what the reason, it had a negative effect on many. And there are a number who decided to do other things that were perhaps more suited for that remote lifestyle. And so how could we move forward? The closest that we could do in this environment from late March until the end of the academic school year was to, the playing and singing was to have individual assessments. And the individual assessments, of course, were done in several ways. We tried to, and I'm sure some of you use the breakout. If you use Zoom, maybe the other platforms have these breakout where you could, my program was very big, or is very big, on student leadership. And so when I selected my, my section leaders and my officers, I gave them a task that would put them in breakout sessions, and they would work with their section and give an account for every student, and making sure that they are on board and they are fully participating, because we all know that in this virtual environment, in this remote environment, kids have found, or were able to find ways to do everything but what was assigned to them. And so I thought, rather than the teacher, me being Dr. J is what they called me, to be in all of these breakout rooms, I definitely would float from one room to the next to look in on everyone. But I wanted this to be more a student-led opportunity, because those breakout sessions, I think, were a great way for the students to be able to talk with their peers about what was going on. And I think this brings me to another topic within this virtual platform, and how teachers had to adjust. It was so very important when we made this transition, really wasn't a transition, this abrupt change from in-person to remote, to make sure it was important that I, as the music director of my ensembles, that I recognize the emotional scar that this was going to leave had already began affecting many of my students. And so it was very important that not only I, as their director, made time to just say, how are you doing? And to give them an opportunity to say absolutely nothing, and that would be okay, or to say how they're feeling, and that would be okay. It was a non-judgmental opportunity, a part of the class structure. And I also made sure, which I know some of you probably did as well, it was important for my students to know that there were times where I wasn't okay. There were times where I had doubt about how I was going to be an effective teacher, because I only knew how to do what I was to do. This in-person, day-to-day functioning, seeing the body language of my students, responding to the body language. I mean, if you're an experienced teacher, or if you're a teacher, you get that sense. You know whether your students are feeling the music that you're working on right now, are really into what's going on, to what's in terms of trying to make music, especially dealing with not being able to do it in the traditional way. And so it was very important. And I think as a result, the students were able, those who understood that there was nothing I or any of their colleagues or any of their peers could do about this, that we just had to move forward. Alice says the students were very sweet. They'd say, we're all in this together. Alice, thank you so much for sharing that, because again, that's what I felt. I got that both verbally and through the energy that I got from the students as well, that they recognized that this was just something that we all had to get through together. We all recognized that this was something none of us had ever experienced, and we just had to get through it together. Michelle says we spent more time just chatting than we ever had before. I agree, Shelley, I bonded with my students much more during this time. Absolutely, and that goes to, thank you, Carolyn, for sharing that. It really goes to that time that I put, and obviously what many of you did, was to take time and not just try to go through the formalities of doing the best you can to give instruction, Sometimes you had to put away the lesson plan for that day, depending on the energy of, when I got to know my students well, I could tell right off the bat when things were not going well as a whole. I mean, you can't necessarily stop when there's an individual problem, but when you get a sense of feel that people are in a situation, it's important to stop and just ask, what's going on? How are you feeling? And even if they don't say anything, you've given them an opportunity to express themselves. And of course, that means a great deal to them. We're not just going through the pace or going through the idea of a classroom, recognizing this stuff isn't hurting us. This change hurt all of us. And so I think it's important. Oh, cool. Carolyn said we had to bring your pet. You had to bring your pet to class, a time where we meet everyone's pet. I actually did that as well. And many of them did that. So it's so nice to see these comments. Thank you so much. It's really, really nice to hear and to see these comments, because what it does is it confirms that we were all thinking pretty close on the mindset, the mindfulness, being mindful of our students during this time. And it wasn't so much about maintaining our program for our legacy. It was really about how do we keep our students engaged? How do we keep them focused as best as we can? How do we make sure that they know that we understand what they're going through? And so again, Michelle and others, thank you so much for sharing that. And so it was actually great to see environment. It was great to hear about the music that they played, other than the music that was given to them in their classes that they took. So what happened next? And so we got through the assessments, as I was saying just a moment ago. These assessments are so very, very important, because again, we want, the reason that they signed up for ensemble is to play and sing. And while these individual assessments didn't provide that same kind of environment, it was as close to that environment as we could get. And it also, it deals with rigor, and we had to be accountable. The students had to be accountable for their instrument and for all of the music that they were assigned. And so it was important that I not give in to not doing what we all love doing and just forget about it and just kind of going with the flow, and show some form of discipline. Of course, I had to set the example. That's what we do. We set the example, and even if we're feeling what they're feeling, we express that, but we still have to move forward. So I knew that in the end that this assessment was not going to give them a sense of where we go? Where is it that a point of arrival? We're going to practice, we're going to practice, we're going to practice, we're going to practice, and where are we going to be? And we all know this, the natural progression to any kind of instruction in class and preparing for music is a concert. Students need to have that place where they're going to demonstrate to the public, to their family, to their friends, how they progressed and how much they enjoyed the music as they progressed. And so I began to look at other things, and I'm going to show this video, and I'm not going to show all of it, but I'm going to give you a taste of it and give you a sense of what, because in the video, you're going to actually hear me explain what I did that I think was very, very helpful. And a number of students, this caught on very, very, very quick. This caught on very, very quick. Let me read a couple of, because I don't want to, a couple of, I want to do this and get to it. A couple of the comments here. Again, thank you so much. This is making this much more enjoyable for me to know that you're a part of this in your comments. Michelle was saying, let me see if I can get the response to what Michelle was saying. Chatting. Very sweet. Let me get to this here. Bonded with students. Yes. Our theme 2021, this is from Michelle, year was it's okay, technical issues, it's okay, string dropped and they had to retune, it's okay, etc. Not stressing over when things didn't go as planned. Michelle, I wish that was a part of my notes because that is the key. Thank you so much for that, because that was the key. It was making sure that all of you had to laugh. You had to laugh. Because when there were things that happened, and there were many things that happened, trying to understand this new system of communicating, my goodness, it was difficult. And things happen. A lot of the times, I don't know about you, but a lot of the times my students, they were helping me understand and to navigate Zoom. I would have been lost numerous times if they didn't say, oh, Dr. J, you actually have to do this, that, and the other. And of course, constant reminders that you're on mute, Dr. J, you're on mute. I got that a lot. But again, I love it, Michelle. Thank you for sharing that. It was okay. And I said that more oftentimes than not during the beginning part of that 20 spring semester. So very important. So here it is. I'm going to share a little bit with you. I'm not going to do the whole thing. It's about 25 minutes, but I'm at least let you get started so you can see how my kids got what they did and the work that came out, the end product, which I was so proud, and I'm proud when I can showcase my students. And again, I want to just also preface before I do this that we all have wonderful stories to tell here. This is not about Rufus Jones and how great he is and how wonderful things turned out, because things did turn out well for us. This is just representing what we all had to do. We had to find ways. Many of us didn't do the virtual concert aspect, but we found ways to continue what we were doing, even if it wasn't the best thing, even if it wasn't as good, and it probably wasn't as good as doing what we would originally do, and that is, of course, in-person learning. But I hope this will, this made me smile. I looked it over yesterday just to remind myself about it, and this was the end result. And rather than talk about it, I'm gonna let myself on video explain what we did, and then we'll listen to the first song, which is actually not an orchestra song, it's a chorus song. But as of you remember that I was the music director for all of the ensembles. But I think we all can agree that it doesn't really matter what, we all kind of had to deal with it in the same way, although albeit different protocols. All right, so let me see if I can get this going. Okay. All right, everyone. It looks like I'm having a little bit of difficulty here. I'm going to try one more thing. Thank you, Carolyn. It's okay. Indeed. It is okay. Indeed. All right. Let me come out and I'll give it a few minutes, and then if it doesn't work, we'll just move on. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, again, my apologies. It's not working, but thank you, Carolyn, for reminding me that it's okay. It is okay. What I wanted to show you, and I think I will probably end with this, since we're supposed to be ending around 1 o'clock, 1:05. I wanted to, again, just kind of go through, I think I have a couple more slides in terms of what happened next. So let's just get right to that. But in other words, just as a quick overview of the virtual concert, that many of you probably experienced that. I found this online where a number of music programs were actually doing this. And so for those of you who are not familiar, go ahead and chat me and let me know if you're familiar with this, the virtual concert. Did anyone try it? Did everyone look into it? I will do that. Thank you very much. I will post it. Let's go ahead. I want to just finish up here. And again, so we finished up that year, which I think is really, really important. We finished up the year, and we had the entire summer to kind of start thinking about what is next. That was extremely difficult. And I have to tell you, the hybrid teaching aspect of it was, I told you this conversation was going to be real. It was the most depressing thing in my teaching career. I've been teaching for 31 years. And this aspect of actually doing this of teaching with those, making arrangement for those to come, of course, all of the things that we had to do to get our room ready, to follow all of the protocols, the distance, you all understand the distance, how much time you could be in the room, even for string ensembles, that we didn't have the same kind of issues as bands or chorus ensembles, but we still had this idea of the possibility of spreading the COVID virus. And so there was a limited amount of time we could actually be in those rooms, but we had to make the best. There was no longer, of course, you all know that we could not share stands. That was certainly something that we as orchestra directors, string orchestra directors, it was something that we taught. We actually taught basically how everyone could be the nature of actually doing reading on one stand. And so those kinds of things can happen. You all know the protocols. We're about to run out of time. We just got a signal that they'll be sending us back to the main, everybody's gonna be coming back to the main room. But again, this is what I dealt with and what we all, I think, dealt with in that academic year. Coming back in that new academic year, understanding more about COVID-19 and how we could protect ourselves, creating new ways to present our class in person, using the system of rotation. One group would come one day, another group would come another, and finding those ways to really produce as best as we could in person and remote teaching at the same time. That was an amazing challenge. And we had to deal more with more attrition more people leaving the program because again, it was just too much. Students wanted to go back to normal. There was this sense of being able to complete that the summer, everyone or everything would have been figured out and we would be able to return as normal. And of course, we all know that that was not the case. It was not the case. So we continued. And as we began to have more vaccines became available, many were able to get the vaccine and come. We had more people showing up. We still had to be very careful with the amount of time we practiced in our rooms. We had to make sure that the room was aired out, even with our HVAC being up to a particular standard. It was still very, very important. But in the end, I think what we learned, I know what I learned, and I bet you all could probably have the same point of view. What we learned from this is simply, as I end this presentation, we learn not to take music for granted. It is more than just a hobby. It is more to our students than just having a sense of relief and getting away from the core requirements. It is a part of who we are. And that's why, even though this perfect storm, which I called it, which was indeed this global pandemic, did not take away our desire to make music. As a matter of fact, it did the opposite. We were more engaged, we were more inspired, we were committed to finding a way to get back to some form of normalcy. And even with the pandemic continuing, that is still the case. All right, so I think we are about out of time. People are going to start returning back to the main room, which is this room. You all don't have to do anything, but just kind of hang out as everybody else returns from the breakout room. Thank you so much for your wonderful comments in the chat. I really enjoyed giving this presentation. My apologies for some of the technical issues, but again, I'll be more than happy to provide those links. Thanks again, guys.
Cool. Well, we have a couple minutes left of this concurrent session, and I really appreciated your expertise. But now that I have you, and we, like I'm looking at my time, we have probably like about 6 minutes. We had some prepared content, and I really appreciate you preparing. But we have everyone all together. I have a question, maybe two, for you, and your starts are as we're starting the new school year. What are some words of encouragement or mindfulness you would give to us if we were just having a beverage of soda, whatever it may be, and we were having just a moment of time? What would you say to our participants here as we're approaching the new school year to be mindful of as music educators moving through the pandemic, as we all discussed? What would be that moment of truth that you can share with us in this moment?
Well, I'll start. First of all, Mr. Rhodes, thank you so much for this opportunity. It was a pleasure presenting and talking about something that means so much to us all. Words of encouragement, ladies and gentlemen, keep doing what you do is the first thing that I would say, because I'm sure if you've done this long enough, even if you haven't done it longer, you have to realize the impact that you have on a number of students, and particularly in what we do as music educators, the impact that we have, and the students who rely on us for answers to very difficult questions. The fact that you were able to continue, I mean, in the strongest, most deadly part of this pandemic, and you answered the call, a noble call to do the job and to never give up, to be real. I talked about, not to get too far in my presentation, but you have to be real. There are things that you can do and things that you cannot do. There are more things we can do now than we could do, say, in March and April of 2020. I think we all would agree with that. And so look at every accomplishment that you've made. If you're having to restart your program, if you have to kind of start over, depending on how things, it is going to be okay, because what you did to bring that program up is the same thing you're going to do to reboot that program. So keep going, do what you do. Trust me when I tell you, your students will appreciate, they already do. Your parents will love you because they see the passion, they see the love, they see your appreciation for the art, and that carries over.
Beautiful. And I just saw in our chat, Suzanne said the entire child matters. I mean, yes, 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 all of that. I appreciate that input. And if anyone wants to put else in the comment, that's fine. I'm going to turn it over to you, Mr. Witherspoon. Can you give us a wraparound?
I would totally agree with Dr. Jones, and just remind you, we just need to remember what it is that our art did for people prior. We really are about community building. Like in this art, this musical art, it is really about community building. Nothing works alone. We work together. And I feel it is important for us to share with our students and remind them and to show them through effort, demonstrated effort, that as they work together, they are building community, and they can take that out of our classrooms and into their lives. And as I said in my own group, I have a friend from junior high school who manages a Coca-Cola bottling plant in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And he says the only reason he's in that position that he's in is because of his time in chorus, getting to work with people like me and people who are not like him. And through high school, I've loved this dude since junior high school, and we were in high school chorus together and traveled around the country together. And this was back in the 80s. I'm that age. And the impact of getting to work with people from different cultures and different backgrounds and different belief systems, and yet create something together, that is what our community needs. That's what our world needs. That's what our country needs. And we are an art form that does it like no other thing does it. And so let's continue to bring that community mindset together. And that in and of itself deals with a lot of the mental health issues. In isolation creates a lot of mental health issues, and togetherness answers a lot of mental health issues. And making music is more therapeutic than practically anything else, and doing it together sends it to another level. So that's my thought.
That's fantastic. And Mr. Witherspoon, that age looks good on you. So, and Dr. Heath Reynolds, can you go ahead and wrap it up for us?
Be inclusive, right? Think outside the box and be willing to try new things. So much came out of the pandemic that was good, that we were willing to try, that we hadn't done previous to COVID. The collaboration, the desire to be there in the classroom, to do the music thing was so apparent during COVID that it was so missed. But I ask all of you to be inclusive as we move forward. We think about, like Suzanne said, the entire child, and that was something I talked about, the social, emotional, developmental deficits that are happening because of COVID. The idea that maybe we have students who aren't achieving at the levels that we expected prior to COVID. So what are we doing to adapt and modify our programs to be more inclusive and to include students who may not have originally found themselves in band, choir, orchestra? And so where are we going from here to reimagine our programs and to be that inclusive, safe place for music learning?
Beautiful. Wow. I hope you enjoyed our 3 concurrent sessions, friends. Remember, if you wanted to view these sessions, the other 2 will be on recording and available in the coming weeks on YouTube. So, you know, if you said, oh man, I wanted to jump around and catch a little bit of everything, you got it there in the next couple of weeks. These are so great. I had the fortune of jumping around throughout, and thumbs up, and just a fantastic job. Dr. Heath Reynolds, Dr. Jones, and Mr. Witherspoon, on behalf of the Nat King Cole Generation Hope, we thank you so much for sharing your expertise and your time today. Thank you so much. Friends, we will now take a very short break for some coffee, tea, stretching, anything else you need to refresh yourself before we get to our last session today. You do not want to miss. So we will go ahead and just pause for 5 minutes, and we'll be back in a couple minutes. Thank you so much again for our panelist discussion.